This is Mr. M, and today is Patriots Day. And what is Patriots Day? Well, Patriots Day is the day Massachusetts commemorates the battles of Lexington and Concord. And these battles took place on April 19th, 1775. So that would have been exactly 245 years ago, yesterday, because yesterday being April 19th. But we celebrate Patriots Day today. It's a very important holiday because those battles really started the American Revolution, which was the war that created American independence from Great Britain because we beat the British and started our own separate country because at one time we were part of Great Britain. And one particular figure on this day that I find interesting was Paul Revere. And Paul Revere had a very special job, and his job on that day, or actually it was really the day before it, on the night of April 18th, his job was to ride through the various villages and towns and warn all the villagers and townspeople that the British troops were heading to Concord, Massachusetts. The British troops were setting off. Now, why were the British troops going to Concord? Well, many of the local Massachusetts, we'll call them patriots or militia, Minutemen, were hiding arms and munitions and weapons because they really were starting to feel like they were going to rebel against the British. And the British did not like this, so they were sending a force of almost 1,000 men or so out to Concord, Massachusetts, to get these arms and weapons that the militia had hidden. And Paul Revere's job, though, was to warn everybody, well, the British are coming, so we got to prepare for their arrival and possibly have a battle with them. They didn't know what would happen exactly, but they wanted to be prepared. And Paul Revere set warning alarms by riding his horse. So how did he get the information to basically take off and go where he did? Well, they gave a signal to Revere, and that signal was put up in the Old North Church in the North End, which many of you have gone to, I'm sure. The Old North Church is still there, and what they did is way up in the church, they hung lanterns that could be seen for miles or seen for a long area. And one lantern hung up would have meant the British troops were going by land. Two would have meant they were going by sea. Well, how many lanterns did they hang? They hung two lanterns, and that meant that the British were actually going by sea, which really meant they were crossing the Charles River from Boston into Charlestown and beyond, and eventually to march into Concord. So Revere saw that there were two lanterns hung, and he knew that the British were going to go by sea. So he got on his horse and rode. And one interesting fact is that when he rode off he was going to head to Concord again, or basically out to Lexington, Concord, to warn everybody, the British. But before he ever really got started, he just had started, he was actually almost captured because the British Army had different officers and all around the area. And Revere ran into a couple of British officers, really, I think around the area of Charlestown. I think it was, probably roughly around where Sullivan Square is now. Revere ran into some British officers, but he escaped. His horse was very fast, and he changed his route. He was going to go one way towards Cambridge, but he decided, well, the British officers were there, so he went the other way, and he went through Medford. And when he went through Medford, he found other people to give out the alarm, and the alarm spread throughout Middlesex County. So towns like Medford and Woburn and Stoneham and Reading, all these places were getting word that the British were coming, and people now were picking up their muskets and getting ready for battle. So Revere was doing a very important thing. He was sending a message out. One also interesting thing is that Revere was not the only rider that night. There was another rider named William Dawes. He doesn't get as much, credit, you could say. But William Dawes went a different route, basically over a small land bridge and through Brookline and into basically Lexington. So he took a more land route. But not many people know that there were other riders that night. It wasn't just Paul Revere. So there were many people eventually riding around and warning people of the British coming. Another interesting fact about Paul Revere is that he was actually captured. He was captured by the British in Concord. And if I can find it, Paul Revere, when he was halfway to Concord, he was stopped by a British patrol. And Paul Revere was arrested. And one officer pointed a pistol to his head. And he said if Paul Revere didn't tell him the truth, he would blow his brains out. So Paul Revere was captured during his ride. But he eventually they let him go. And Paul Revere was able to make his way back to Lexington and really go on in history as a very important figure, a very famous figure. And one thing that's interesting, I always felt, is there's a famous thing people think about Paul Revere is that he was yelling out during his ride that the British are coming, the British are coming. Well, in many ways, this is actually it's really a myth. He wasn't probably saying the British are coming because at that time in 1775, America had not yet broken away from England. The American colonies were still part of Britain, and Massachusetts was still part of Britain. So they wouldn't have been saying the British are coming. What they probably would have said is the regulars are coming, and regulars meant British troops. And the British troops were also known as Redcoats because they wore these very splendid kind of red coats. And I have a picture there of what the British soldiers might have looked like. And so they made probably quite a sight, and all those red coats and the gleaming swords and bayonets coming down the road. Probably would have been pretty intimidating. All right, so on this Patriots Day, I thought it'd be interesting to talk a little bit about Paul Revere, and maybe you can read up about some other figures or some other interesting people on Patriots Day. All right, thanks a lot. Bye now.